Welcome to Disruptive Successor, a show for next generation leaders in family businesses and entrepreneurs who want to disrupt the status quo and take their existing business to a whole new level. We all know that what got us here isn't going to get us there. This show will provide inspiration, advice, and resources to help you create massive impact.
This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Hi, it's Jonathan Goldhill, and welcome back to another episode of the Disruptive Successor Show. In today's show, I'll be talking to Brandon Miller about how to boost team engagement and management skills to create an engaged workforce. We all know that employer well-being is a strong indicator of performance at work. In fact, Gallup reports 60% of the workforce is emotionally detached and nearly 20% are miserable. When these folks sign off for the day, this detachment or negativity comes into the family space, making for a continuation of the challenge. I want to welcome Brandon Miller to the show, but before I do that, Brandon is the author of Play to Their Strengths, An Incredible Parent. He is a certified strengths coach and is one of the first 7 certified Gallup Clifton StrengthsFinder coaches in the world, and CEO at 34 Strong Inc., where their mission is to achieve 1 million smiles through building highly engaged, strengths-based organizations that become known as great places to work. Brandon is also the co-founder of Incredible Family, a consulting agency that educates, empowers, and encourages working parents to take a strengths-based approach to parenting in order to unlock their best selves and raise strong, happy children and teens. Brandon, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Jonathan. Great to be here.
Yeah, what an interesting bio. I love how you've paired the personal with the professional, the family with the business. It goes. Now, why did you make that choice? Was it intentional, accidental? How did that come to be?
Sure. I think as a part of doing the work that we do inside of organizations, I found myself often using one of my children to cite examples of what it looked like to focus on strengths. And so as a father of 7, you might imagine I have a lot of stories to tell.
Wow. Yeah.
And so because my journey of shifting to strength started when my older 3 kids were going into their teenage years, many parents who have either lived through that or are getting there could relate to the challenge of connecting to your teens. And most parents would enjoy some way to keep communication lines open, and then beyond the teen years into their adult years, how to keep that relationship up and in a healthy place. And so it seemed like a natural fit to share stories that could be relevant. And that I think after enough recommendations to write a book, my wife and I sat down and said, let's capture what we've done. Let's take the essence of what we do at 34 Strong, capture it in our home, and see if it can benefit some parents out there in similar places.
Yeah, so interesting. So, well, in a moment, we're going to have to tell people what StrengthsFinder is, because probably most of the people listening to this have no idea. But before I do that, I think people have already maybe come to the conclusion that it's some kind of an assessment or something like that. And so my question is did you assess all of your 7 children? And at what point in time does one do that?
Sure. Almost. So 6 out of 7 have taken the StrengthsFinder. Number 7 is not quite old enough yet. So it's around 15 years old, 14, 15. He's 12.
Okay.
So we'll get there. They do have a version for kids called Strengths Explorer that a child as young as 10. So Daniel did that younger. So we do have a family chart that shows everybody in their strengths and helps us to have very interesting conversations. And fun fact, so my older three kids are married. At the point that they began to date whomever they were dating, I would ask that person to also take the assessment so that I could give both of them and my kid an assessment of what they were looking at and heading into. And my two daughters at home right now, I have a 19 and almost 18-year-old. Both have had some significant others over the last season. And they both would say that they really find it helpful to know where that other person is coming from and how to relate and engage, knowing this language of strengths.
Well, I'm sorry, but I can't take out of my mind the picture of Robert De Niro in Meet the Fockers. And I'm thinking, Brandon, you're the non-CIA, the StrengthsFinder version of Robert De Niro in that movie. And you're like, kid, this is who we have to accept you into the family. But look, there's no bad StrengthsFinder. There just is, right? It's like DISC, or, there's no bad DISC or good DISC report. There's just, this is who you are. So
that's right.
So tell us, what is StrengthsFinder? How did it come about?
Yeah, so in the 80s and 90s, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Donald Clifton was coming off of a season where he was a part of what today we would refer to as positive psychology emergence, or a cohort of other psychologists who were just really thinking about a reframe of how we approach development. And for his part, he was very interested in changing how we educate kids, changing how we think about parenting, and very much interested in how we could shift management philosophy to an approach where we build on people's natural talents and strengths, and then we manage around weaknesses, which is diametrically opposite to the traditional approach that most of us employ. Mm-hmm. And for his part, all he said was, look, when it comes to athletics and performing arts, we already do this. We assess a person's abilities and we position them to do what they do best as much as we can.
Sure.
But then in parenting, school, management, we do the exact opposite. We position them to get better at something they're not as good at. So why don't we just take this approach we already all know, apply it to these areas, we probably could get better outcomes.
Right.
Along the path, what was determined is that we needed a language. He felt that we were lacking an internal language to describe what was right with people. And so he and his team developed what was referred to as StrengthsFinder, today called Clifton Strengths, in his honor. So it has gone through a little shift in branding. But the StrengthsFinder is intended to provide people a language. There are 34 distinct characteristics, or now we call them distinct Clifton strengths. And you're right, they just give you a really good picture of, this is you, Jonathan. For better or worse, this is you. This is probably how you're going to show up most times. And you can leverage these strengths to sustain excellence, to be at your very best. And you want to pay attention to them because you also could leverage them to not be excellent. They can actually work against you. They really show up neutral. We then can help determine which way we grow them, develop them, and engage with them.
So if you're an employer and you're looking at assessments, and if you're really an educated employer educated about assessments, you might be familiar with DISC and Myers-Briggs and Colby and StrengthsFinder. Which ones, or which one or one should you run, or should you do all of them? And like, at what point is it overloaded?
Right.
What are your thoughts on this?
We at 34 Strong, though, we lean into the 34 strengths of Clifton Strengths because we think the language is very simple to understand, and it gives enough of a broad overview that you can really find yourself in a full 34 strengths profile.
Right.
So you're going to see your most dominant strengths, your least dominant, and then what to do with them. However, when it comes to building a great place to work, we're really assessment agnostic. You can get there with Myers-Briggs. You can get there with DISC, Kolb. There are many really strong assessments out there. What it roots back to is, how are you helping your people leaders to leverage the tool? Any tool can be effective if it's well educated inside. And where we found the gap in organizations we work with is the intention of leaders to have effective tools to help teams become highly engaged. The gap was in actually training people to know what to do, how to do it, how you bring this down into a broad staff team and carry it forward with some consistent checkpoints. And so that's where we find ourselves with Clifton Strengths is we've helped organizations learn to do that, how to train your people managers from their emergence as supervisors all the way up to your C-level team members.
Gotcha. So you recommend that all leaders of all teams use some battery of assessments in getting to know themselves better?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because what we know is that if I go back to parenting, education, management, we are well versed in the conventional or negativity bias approach to development. We assess a person. Here's the classic case. Child presents parent with report card, A, B, C, A. Parents will spend 80 to 90% of their time focused on that C to try to bring it up to a B or an A than they will to build on the A's. So very young, we learn our path to success comes through fixing weaknesses. And if we go, well, maybe not, maybe that isn't your path to success. Maybe your path to success is to build those A's beyond where the A tells us where you're at, to sustain that awesome outcome that a person is capable of, and manage the C's, get them up to, snuff, standard, whatever they need to be, because it's likely those might not be areas where you're going to spend your focus in your future academic endeavors. So when a people manager arrives into the place of, hey, congratulations, you're now responsible to get these people to perform often the way that you performed, right? You're often elevated because you were an outstanding performer. And now you have the enviable or unenviable job of get them to do what you did. We use sales, for example. Great salesperson, you're now the sales manager, get them to sell. So I am forced or not really well understanding, okay, I'm going to teach them what I did. And here's where the breakdown happens, right?
Right, exactly.
What I did worked for me. It may not work for them. If I try to turn them into me, I'm essentially asking them to become who they're not. And this almost never works out well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, so Dan Sullivan, who's the founder of Strategic Coach, I imagine you're familiar with him. He's long been a promoter of Colby, but one of his key contributions is that people should focus on their strengths and not build on their weaknesses. But they should manage their weaknesses. And I always wondered if there's data to support that. If there's been research. Are you familiar with any?
I'm familiar with the reality if we connect strengths to engagement, because this is Gallup's core anchor. They talk a lot about the connection between how a person is developed and how they show up at work. And they give 3 distinct categories. So a person will either be engaged, that is a great team member, high output, high performance oriented person. Everything we want in a team member is in that engaged category. Then the 2 that challenge us are either disengaged, so just checked out, I'm around, but I'm just going through the motions, or the 3rd, which is the most devastating, actively disengaged. I'm working against you. And so when a person is taught to focus, as you said, Dan Sullivan reminds us and does well, they're more likely, 6 times more likely to stay engaged, to stay focused in that high space of great attitude, great engaged with team members, customers. And so most organizations that we work with start somewhere around 20 to 30% engagement. So about a 2/3 opportunity to get better with who's on the team.
Right.
And when they start there, what they simply acknowledge, what we simply present is, here is your latent potential already here. Don't hire another person. It's all right here. What if we could take this and just double the number, get you to 70% engagement? What would it be like if more than half of your people showed up this way as compared to what we currently see? And that's the metric. That's what we want to base it against, is then with higher engagement, can we see increased profit? Can we see better productivity? Can we see retention numbers going the way we want them to? And most importantly for many, how are the customer metrics? Are we getting the right feedback that gets us into the right places?
Yeah. Well, I mean, anecdotally, it's been really clear to me. My high performing clients who have engaged teams and have healthy teams that are aligned to the vision and the business plan, where they're really aligned to the core values of the company also, and those core values are alive and well. Anecdotally speaking, there's no question that they get increased profitability, or that if things do turn south, their ability to get back into the black quickly or into the green, is it's dependent upon the team. And and Pat Lencioni, I often quote that introductory sentence from his book 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, where he says it's not technology, it's not strategy, it's not finance, but it's basically teams. A healthy and engaged team gives you the ultimate competitive advantage. And so there's no question about it in my mind. You guys probably have research, or Gallup probably has research to support it. And
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Anecdotally, here's a company we started with a couple of years back, right before the pandemic, and then obviously took some pause and reset. We started with a challenge to measure just the engagement of their people leaders. Let's see how they are doing. In this case, they had 100 and some odd people leaders in the organization. Their score came back at 37% engaged. So that's leaving, again, about 2/3 of people leaders who are either disengaged or actively disengaged. We said, let's set a goal. Let's move this number past 50. Let's get more people leaders engaged, not engaged, and let's carefully study all of the key performance metrics that you want in this case study to look at. So in the course of 1 year, we went from 37% to 51% engagement. This company was turning 38 years old. They had their most profitable year of business in the entire 38 years in that setting, had one of the best years of retention they'd ever had across the board some of the most amazing customer metrics. They happened to be a company that was in the retail space, a lot of return business. And so in just looking at, that increase, just moving it past middle, just getting critical mass on our side. Now our endeavor, in fact, we're about to remeasure, is to hit the 75-80%. We want people leaders there. And then we'll really look at, okay, now what does the rest of the team tell us? So they're a great case study of an example of a team that simply decided this is now the number one focus, and everything else will come under engaging our people leaders.
Okay. So a few key questions here is, as people are listening, they're thinking how do I measure employee engagement? So there is something known as the Gallup 21 questions. Q12. Sorry.
Q12.
Got that quite backwards.
We work with that tool because it tandems very well with the strengths approach, and it really is the genesis of employee engagement surveys. Because while Clifton and the team were developing the strengths assessment, they were also tasked with, well, we got to know if it works. We got to determine, and so they did this exhaustive study. Asked 1 million managers 100 questions each, sorted through 100 million responses to determine what are the indicators, the primary indicators of what will or will not engage a workforce. Because it's only 12, what we favor with this report is it takes 5 minutes. It takes a person 5 minutes to answer. You're rating these 12 indicators plus 1, so there's a 13th on a scale of 1 to 5. And because of the database that now sits near 50 million respondents over the last 20 years, we can tell you where you rank globally compared to teams. And we can tell you exactly if the numbers work, you're engaged. It's called the engagement index, where those three sit. When we follow up that survey, we do what's called engagement focus groups. Then we get in and actually talk to your teams and hear now anecdotally, what is the reality of these numbers? And then where do we focus? And here's the key, Jonathan. Because many companies do surveys, what they don't do is follow up. And then what they really don't do is take action on the follow-up.
Right. And
there's no greater mover of engagement than to take action on what you're given. In the company I was just citing, Q2. So this is the second question, says, I have the material and equipment I need to do my work right. Basic question, right? Do I have what I need? You told me what the job is. Do I have the resources? They happen to be across several categories very low in that score comparatively. And what they found is they had some technology issues. They had some hardware issues. They had things that could be fixed with some investment, some shifting. That one indicator alone, taking action, I would tell them that was the key to moving past 50%, just outfitting people. And for many of the leaders, it was, we didn't even know. Here we are thinking, of course you have your computer, your desk, your stuff, everything here. It was a great example of, oh, okay, now we know, let's take action. It was simple, straightforward, gave them what they needed.
Okay. So now let's contrast this with the Q12 with the employee net promoter score, which is a very simplistic. It's based on the net promoter score for customers. Most of you probably have heard about it. We haven't done a show yet on it, but it's basically one question, which is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend or refer us to a client? And in the employee's case, it's how likely would you be to recommend or refer us to another person to work here? And they take the percentage of promoters, which are 9s and 10s, and the percentage of detractors, which are 6 through 0, and they get the delta between the two. Super simplistic, really good, I think, for customers. But I guess we could contrast the net promoter score with customer satisfaction surveys, and contrast the employee net promoter score with the Q12 employee engagement survey. I mean, the Q12 seems so much more robust and yet still simple enough.
It is. And I really like the net promoter. I like the simplicity of just knowing it. The 13th question in the Q12 is, how satisfied are you with this as a place to work?
Right.
So it really is getting to that. Would you recommend this? And that's a score we watch really close because we can tell them, if you just watch, it's Q00. If you just watch QO, you're going to know how likely they are to stay, because that one's going to tell you what you need to know. What follows with the other 12 is where you can look to bring some solutions, because it starts with really basic needs into how do I feel as a member of this team, into now how do I engage organizationally. And so what we tell organizations is there are a myriad of great surveys out there. So similar to our assessment agnostic, if you find an assessment that works for you to measure and tell you how your workforce is doing, our great encouragement is take action on it. Whatever you do,
right? Sure.
Do not just survey to read the news. Take action. You will be amazed at how consistent that follow-up process is to get you better outcomes.
Well, I would guess that most entrepreneurs self-assess with using no instruments whatsoever.
Sure.
And so let's help these who are self-assessors to understand two things. One, what does a highly engaged workforce look or feel like? And two, what's the benefit? Yeah. We know the profitability. We saw the case. We heard the case study, and I've got some data to back it up. It's on my website as well. But how do you know? What does it look or feel like first? And then what are the benefits?
Sure. I think most of us as entrepreneurs, and I'll classify myself here, we have to come to terms with the reality that people aren't always telling us what we need to hear. People often tell us what we want to hear.
Right.
Because we're often the force or the driver behind the business initiatives and the business success. And so as a result, with that same force that drives the business is also the same force that tries to move people, not always in the best way for their sake. And so what a survey can do, when you allow confidentiality, you allow people to answer in a way where there's no concern of how it's going to reflect directly, you get some really good intel. You get some things that you need to hear. Not always what you want to hear, but you'll get what you need to hear. Our company at 34 Strong, we like to say that we have to eat our own cooking.
Yep.
We have to do our own survey. So we just completed our Q12 for this year. Mm-hmm. And we got some feedback that we were very happy with. And we got some feedback that we were challenged by. And so we're taking our team through the exact same focus groups. We do what's called the state of the team. And my business partner, Darren Versami, and I, we're going to sit down with our consultant. We hire an outside consultant to work with us. And we're going to hear what we need to hear to make some changes. That's often the gap for founders. That's often the gap for drivers, because we don't always understand how to take that data and turn it into something actionable and intentional to move the needle. So now that we've done this a few years and we drive to be recognized as a great place to work, we're very much looking forward to this, because we can't expect year over year adding team members growth that we're not going to run into gaps. It's expected. And so we hope to hang on to the things that we do really well and keep driving those. And then we equally hope to find places where we have room for improvement and spend some time figuring out how to build those up.
Yeah, no, that's great. I just completed a leadership 360 with one of my clients. It's a client I've been working with for a number of years. And this was someone who was head of their finance and administration department who needed to get some feedback. And, my experience was, look, this isn't going to be easy, but you're going to get some good stuff. And don't try and associate who said what to whom, because I do it very casually. I gather the answers to 4 questions, which would be like, what could you do to be more effective? What could you do less of to be more effective?
Mm-hmm.
And then give this feedback to them. What are their strengths? And I think it was really helpful. So big believer in this whole process. So tell us a little about your company. What is 34 Strong? Who are you guys? How many are you? What do you guys do?
So at our core, we go into organizations that typically are starting from a place where they have a challenge, and we're helping them to grow into or become a recognized best place to work. The way we help them get there is we want to help them get to high engagement. So a high score of into the 70 percentile or more, 80, 90%. And then we equally want to help them get to a place where they embed or implement a culture that teaches people leaders how to be effective coaches. Because what we have found is that many managers where they struggle, this is the big gap, and Jonathan, where we spend most of our time is training people leaders how to be a great boss.
Sure.
What's the difference between a great boss and not a great boss, and how to be one? And it's highly rewarding work. So we really help bridge that gap between leadership expectations and their leadership, their managers, their supervisors, highly engage them. And we found a formula that works by really shifting that mindset of a manager to, I'm not just here to tell you what to do and get you to perform so I look better, which is sadly often what's happening. It's, I'm here to help you and coach you to be successful so we win. So the organization wins, you win, I win. And that shift is where a lot of our time gets spent in that manager middle. I spoke for years inside a CEO organization, and I would ask the room. So I have 1,000 survey respondents. I would ask, how many of you have programs for your emerging people leaders, supervisor, manager, director, what have you, that teaches them how to be effective managers, how to engage people? Less than 5% had any program of note, any. Most would say, upon just honest reflection, we don't do anything. We promote you in, and it's, sink or swim, fly or die.
It's been my experience totally that most of my clients who are at the stage where they're, so most of them come to me, they're probably 11 to 50 employees, but they've been around for quite a while, a long time. And now they're really looking to take the business to the next level, because most of them are next gen leaders. Many of them are in family businesses, and they really want to professionalize and make the business more corporate, but they have nothing in the way of training for managers. And I used to have a program that I would run, but it wasn't all that deep, and I wasn't passionate about it. And so I would imagine that we are good complementary strategic partners. You're doing culture, employee engagement, management, and leadership skill development, while I'm implementing a scaling up or entrepreneurial operating system type of methodology. Works really well together, and would see great results. We have
had fantastic relationships with EOS partners.
I bet.
Because many of them, what they do to process, we do for people.
Right.
And it's for our EOS friends that have done a really great job implementing that process. They realize, if I don't solve helping my people managers be better, because here's the scary stat. I'll give this to you and your listeners. Employee engagement lands somewhere around 33%. In the United States. Globally, it's around 17%. So the US does actually better than many of our friends around the world. But the scary number is that manager engagement, people manager engagement, sits right at 35%. And the greatest opportunity an organization has is solve the middle. That is, the middle is where your greatest opportunity lives. Gallup wrote a book a couple of years back titled "It's the Manager." because they were wanting to emphasize solve the manager challenge. You will fix so many of your internal organizational difficulties just by really advancing the engagement of that group.
So true and so powerful. And so tell us, you're the parent of 7.
I am.
Got a lot of experience, and you include this work in your parenting by, I mean, you've got this incredible family consulting agency, and sounds really, really interesting. Where do you find your passion? Does it just go back and forth between the two, the business and the family? Is it?
My passion is my family, number one, but
of course.
The company, Incredible Family, we support working parents. That at our base, we support working parents and the people who lead them. So we have what's called working parent advocate programs to help inside organizations recognize that working parents do have a different challenge, especially what the last 2 years brought to light. They do, and there's a chance to really benefit. And then, of course, we provide services directly into homes and help parents who either one are doing great, but they want to help their kids be highly successful. They want high performance parenting, or parents that are in crisis. We don't purport ourselves as therapists, so we're not there to solve some of those deeper challenges, but we are there to solve. What do you do with an unmotivated teenager? What do you do with a challenging school age? Like, that's where we can get in and help shift their philosophy and see fantastic results around thinking about my school age kid more from their strengths, thinking about myself as a parent from what are my parenting strengths. And it's actually a different assessment, Jonathan. We have what's called the Incredible Parent Assessment. It gives you your parenting strengths.
Oh, so they're different. So what we talked earlier before we recorded the show, that I've gone through my assessment, and I did it years ago. It seems to line up well, but I would be different at work than I am at home.
We just give different terms. So what we identified in our research were 12 different parenting types. And out of these parenting types, which do mirror over into other assessments, you'll see yourself in the Kolb, the Myers-Briggs, StrengthsFinder, but the terms are specific to your style. So for example, my number one style as a parent is I'm a trainer. So I am the one that's establishing the boundaries, setting up the programs for development in my house, holding my kids accountable. My wife, on the other hand, she's really high in zest as a parent. My wife loves to be the ambassador of fun, plan the parties, plan the outings, enjoys all that surrounds that part of our familial life, holidays, birthdays, what have you. And so we balance well. That's a really helpful way for us to understand how we show up as parents and how we could support each other and allow each other to flourish in that role.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right. So if people want to know more about you guys, your team, your company, or want to know more about what their strengths are, where do they start?
If they navigate to 34, the number 34, the word strong.com, at 34strong.com, they can contact us. They can tell us they heard through this show, and we'll provide them with an access code to get their strengths. No cost.
Great. Okay,
we'll
great.
give them an access code. They can learn their strengths. And then, if they want to further and have a conversation with a coach, we're happy to help with that as well. Usually 20 minutes. You can get a pretty good idea of what those strengths tell you about yourself. Really helpful. So 34strong.com, really cool way to listen and learn about strengths and how it can implement personally, professionally. If there are any parents listening today that want to know about the home, it's incrediblefamily.com. And Incredible Family, it's just, wow, that really sparked something. I have a challenge or an opportunity with my kids. Love to know more, incrediblefamily.com. We have a fabulous team of coaches over there that only do all day long. They just help parents.
So fantastic. Brandon, thanks so much for being on the show today. I'm going to wrap up with these thoughts, which is that, folks, if you're thinking about whether or not your company is healthy, aligned to a vision, where you have a really engaged leadership team and engaged management team and workforce, if these are issues that concern you, then you need to reach out to Brandon or myself. Look for some assistance here and measure. I love the idea of starting with measuring your employee engagement at the start of a working with someone like one of ourselves, and then measuring it a year or 3 years down the line to see what the improvements in your profitability, your level of satisfaction, and your experience. So, Brandon, I don't know if you want to weigh anything on top of that, but
I could not agree more, Jonathan. If you're a great first step, and it's a very affordable step, is to start by measuring where are you at as a team. If you have a minimum of 5 leaders, just start with 5. You could do a survey with 5 of them just to figure out where they land. If you have more, you could start with that group. Typically, you can get that for $20 a person, which is going to include the survey, the results, and often a debrief to help you understand what you just learned. Fabulous. Just you can't manage what you don't measure. Many of us know that. Drop the pin, find out where you're at. It's a great starting point, because if you already have a system, it might mean you just have to tweak it. If you don't, it might be time to evaluate what are we using as our people development system and strategy, and it gives you some place to look and build from.
Thanks. All right, guys, you know the drill. If you like this show, please share it with others. Give us a 5-star review on your podcast listening app of choice. And thanks for sticking around, and see you at the next show.
This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful, so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Thank you for joining us on the Disruptive Successor podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, review, and share with a friend who would benefit from the message. If you're interested in picking up a copy of my book, Disruptive Successor, go to disruptivesuccessor.com.